Welcome to the first in a year-long series of special Truth to Tell programs looking at key issues facing various communities around the Twin Cities and across Minnesota. We're calling it Community Connections, and the whole idea is to bring these conversations on important issues like education, the environment, healthcare, politics and the elections, and so on, right into the communities where folks who face those issues can be a real part of them. So today we've gathered in the meeting rooms of Minneapolis Urban League on the North Side of Minneapolis, and we have with us a live and lively audience, as we will have each month in one part or another of the cities and of the state. And we want to quickly thank the Urban League as well as the Alliance for Metropolitan Stability, Russ Adams, Joan Van Hala, and Ebony Adedayo, who have been helping us along as our community partners in this issue, and others later perhaps, who knows. And they'll remain on top of these transit issues throughout the regional development.
And we're being seen by television audiences around the area thanks to St. Paul Neighborhood Network and their talented crew. And this month we explore the issues arising from a plan to put a light rail along what's being called the Bottineau Transitway, starting in downtown Minneapolis, running through the North Side and then on to Brooklyn Park. Bottineau will be among the last light rail corridors built. Some other corridors will still have to decide whether they'll run rails or what's called rapid bus transit, a sort of souped-up bus that would have its own dedicated lane so that it could travel at higher speeds.
Most of you know that the long-planned and long-disputed Central Corridor is almost complete and will start its light rail service from downtown St. Paul to downtown Minneapolis in about a year, about in early 2014, we hope at least. And it'll be called the Green Line, while the region's first light rail, or LRT line, the Hiawatha, is going to be called the Blue Line. The Bottineau will actually be an extension of the Blue Line when it's all done. And so it'll be an extension of Hiawatha. Someday, I don't know, I kind of like the names, don't you? But those regional transit planners have taken their cues from all the cities and regions, coast to coast, where all rail and transit lines have colors for names. Anyway, many of the issues the North Side and near ring suburbs to the northwest are facing, like access to the line and the impacts on business and community development along and out from the corridor, aren't totally unlike those along the Central Corridor. Some of the differences, let me just say, some of the differences are we have two major cities in one case, and then we have one major city, the county, and all these suburban communities along the Bottineau. That changes the complexity a little bit.
And the next step in the Bottineau light rail development is what's called the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, usually called the DEIS. And this is the document that breaks everything down into a lot of engineering terms, as well as some of the housing and small business impacts along the way. And that DEIS is being put together as we speak. And it's being guided primarily by the Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority. But before we get too technical, we want to show you a short video that our friends at ACER, that's the African Career Education and Resource Incorporated organization, put together to introduce this whole idea of a Bottineau corridor transitway.
The African Career Education and Resource Inc., or ACER, was founded in 2008 as a volunteer-driven and community-based organization to close the resource, health, and information disparities in Minnesota's communities of African descent. ACER is committed to creating access, equity, and opportunity in a number of areas. In the health and wellness category is ACER's Making Transit Meaningful project. ACER was among 10 community-based organizations to receive funding through the Metropolitan Council's Corridors of Opportunities initiative. And ACER has been able to partner with the City of Brooklyn Park to increase awareness and engage with the African immigrant and African American communities to increase their decision-making and in the development of the Bottineau Transit Corridor in the northern and northwest suburbs.
During the mobile tour and forum with ACER, we were able to take residents on an experience that allowed them to be pedestrians for the entire day. They started off the morning by parking their cars at the 63rd and Bottineau Boulevard Park and Ride in Brooklyn Park. They had to let go of their cars for the day and hop on a bus that took us to South Minneapolis near the Hiawatha and Lake Street station. And at that location near the station, we heard from panelists from county agencies, from Metropolitan Council, and from developers that have done some work in other corridors to get a feel for what transit is or what transit-oriented development is all about. After the panels, we were able to actually start our tour. In less than 5 minutes, we were on the Hiawatha light rail train from the Lake Street station to Mall of America. And then from Mall of America, we hopped on a Metro Transit bus to head to Apple Valley, and that allowed us to experience of getting from Mall of America to Apple Valley in less than 15 minutes. In Apple Valley, we learned more about the bus rapid transit system, and we also had the chance to tour the Apple Valley transit system. We were able to view the city from the top of the parking ramp in the station, and that really gave us a feel for all the development and residential and commercial space that is in very close proximity to the station. And after the tour of that station, we hopped back on the bus and were able to head to downtown Minneapolis and start our visualization tour of the Bottineau Corridor. Of course, there's nothing in the Bottineau Corridor currently that is like the Cedar Avenue Bus Rapid Transit System or the LRT, but it allowed us to go through the various areas of the Bottineau Corridor from downtown Minneapolis through North Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Crystal, into Brooklyn Park and Maple Grove, and visualize what could be in that transit area, whether it's improvement to the existing bus systems, a new light rail train, or a bus rapid train system. So it was an exciting opportunity to use our imaginations and brainstorm on the potential opportunities in the Bottineau area from downtown Minneapolis to the Maple Grove, Brooklyn Park area.
Thank you, Acer. Thank you. Very nice job. Okay. Many players are involved in all of this light rail and bus transit planning and execution. And well, you all know you'll have some questions for our panelists as the evening progresses here. It is evening when this is being taped, I must tell you, because you're going to hear this on Monday morning audio on KFAI's TruthToTell, which is our regular program on KFAI. Well, anyway, we'll do that question and answer period toward the end of this hour, and then we can talk a little bit after that too, and we'll get that up online for you to take a look at, and you can see that kind of stuff. So let's meet our panelists and lay out some of these issues for you.
Yes, first we have with us Kenya McKnight, and she is the North Side Transportation Network, or with the North Side Transportation Network, which is part of NERC, or the North Side Residents Redevelopment Council. As such, she represents NTN on the Met Council's Transit Advisory Board, and she's also a newly designated Bush Leadership Fellow. Ms. McKnight, welcome to Truth to Tell. Glad to have you today.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here. Bobby Joe Champion is the newly elected state senator from District 59. He's vice chair of the powerful Senate Finance Committee. It's under Dick Cohen, isn't it?
That's right.
That's what I thought. As well as a member of both the Policy and Finance Division of the Transportation and Public Safety Division of Finance. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, very good. Senator, welcome to you.
Thank you so very much.
Nice to have you here.
Yes, and with us also is Gary Cunningham. He's well known to the community, former head of the Hennepin County African American Men Project, and he's now a program officer for the Northwest Area Foundation and a member of the Met Council. Mr. Cunningham, welcome to you.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Gary. And finally, representing Brooklyn Park is Winfred Russell. He's our suburban guy here tonight. Mr. Russell is, also serves as African Career Education and Resource Executive Director and was a candidate for Brooklyn Park Mayor last fall. Slim loss, as I understand it, and has been active in the Minnesota Liberian community, and we're glad to have you with us, Mr. Russell.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah.
And just a reminder that our panel will have questions and comments towards the end of the hour, or if you have questions and comments, you can ask our panel at that time. And we'll also have another question and answer session after the regular program ends. You'll be able to see and hear those discussions later online. So that last half hour will be online only. So keep an eye out for those announcements. We'll post that on truthtotell.org, as well as on our Facebook and Twitter pages.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get the lay of the land as it sits right now. And we're going to first turn to Kenya McKnight, who's the reason she has a Bush Fellowship is that she's studying all this stuff. So she's our scholar, our resident scholar here. We can get to the expectations and concerns that, especially the money, a little bit later. But you're on the Transit Advisory Board, right? Transportation Advisory Board of the Met Council. This is another powerful unit, ladies and gentlemen. The Transportation Advisory Board. So what can you tell us about the process thus far? And let's not preclude the previous discussions that have been held on this line. Okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. Just a bit of a correction. I was appointed to the Metropolitan Transportation Advisory Board by Gary Cunningham here, and on behalf of the residents within the district, not necessarily NTN, but I do serve as a resident leader within NTN.
I get it.
So the question again was...
just tell us all about the Bottineau. No.
So my story is...
Just tell us about the process up to this point, if you will.
Sure.
Thanks.
Well, I'll just say how I got involved with NTN was probably about... I first heard about the Bottineau in 2008 with a meeting that Congressman Ellison held at the North Regional Library, where there was talk about the Bottineau going along possibly Lowry Avenue and Broadway. So there was an original group of folks who were meeting and talking about this for a long time.
And these were all different alignments, isn't that correct? I mean,
Well, yeah,
Lowry was alignment, Broadway was a possible alignment.
The conversation there was that's where they wanted the Bottineau. And so it kind of disappeared, and I didn't hear anything about it again until Representative Champion reopened the conversation, and that's about a couple of years ago, and that's when I began to get involved and learned about the North Side Transportation Network. That effort was formed there, and I got involved. And so from there, this group of resident leaders, community agencies, the Alliance being one, the North Side Resident Redevelopment Council, a host of folks, West Broadway Area Coalition, came together to begin to provide well-needed education to the community about what it was, how it worked, and what sort of opportunities and challenges were connected to it. From there, we did various of outreach, door knocking, talking to residents. We've gathered lots and lots of feedback. We've documented the process with them as a way to show, the county, Met Council, and the city, the input, because, we show up in meetings and we talk.
How did that documentation look? I mean, what did you do? How did you bring that into paper for possible consumption by other people?
Sure,
How did you do that?
we accepted it in written form. We wrote down some things as people were talking.
So these are
We
comments
also-
that were fed to you both in writing and by
Verbal in
Yeah,
meetings.
okay.
So there was, it was
You
this,
said you did door knocking too.
we
right?
did door knocking. So it was
Oh.
really
And did
just
you go all along
Good.
the line to all the different
we door knocked in
municipalities?
North Minneapolis impact zone, primarily in the near north section, which is the northern side of Ocean Highway, until there, because out of respect for our other colleagues in Harrison, who have been working very hard on the Southwest. They were also doing work on the Bottineau in their area, so we just covered
yeah.
this area because it wasn't well represented. So we did door knocking. We did phone banks. We held a lot of meetings, got a lot of information out, took a lot of input. We stayed involved with the county's process, the city. So we were very involved with the whole process along the way. We'd invite our representatives to meetings to share updates politically, policy-wise, to help us think about opportunities. So we did a lot of great work. We coordinated a bus tour, to have folks kind of tour the line and see what it would look like from the different proposed alternative routes, one on Oliver, the Penn. So we did a lot of work and we
So all
documented
this was
it.
taken into account when deciding on the final line that is settled on?
Yes,
Okay.
from the Policy Advisory Committee that Gary or Representative Gary and Senator now.
It was then Representative, now
Champion,
Senator. Okay.
is sits on as members of the Policy Advisory Committee who made that final
Okay.
determination. So what we did finally is NTN also conducted a vote parallel to the county's process to make sure that other voices who couldn't go to the county meetings
Yeah.
were involved or included in that process. So we gathered all the information, the feedback, the voting information, and we got it to the Policy Advisory Committee so that they could actually use that in their consideration. So we have a document, we have
Yeah.
several pieces of paper. So we have a document with all of that feedback that we still use in the work that we're doing.
So Senator and Gary Cunningham, why don't you, and Gary, you may want to get a little closer to that microphone. Talk about how did that vote go and what was that about? Who was the constituency allowed to vote on that stuff?
Well, this is Senator Bobby Joe Champion, because I know that this is also being recorded for your listening audience.
You're
so
very,
it's-
very kind,
Hey,
sir.
I know a little bit about this, let me say.
Okay.
First of all, I want to thank you all for being here and also for just the eloquence of Kenya McKnight to articulate exactly what happened. When I first heard about Bottineau, I being on the Transportation Committee, I was then in the House, and Commissioner McLaughlin came and he was talking about various lines that
That
was
would be
going on.
Peter McLaughlin of the Hennepin County Board of Commissioners.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And so he was talking and he was being eloquent and he says, and we're looking at having a light rail system to go right through North Minneapolis. And my head was down and so my head came up. Because what was interesting is because I had never heard about Bottineau and there was no engagement as I understood it at the time. And so immediately or
You mean like
expeditiously-
community engagement? There hadn't been, the community hadn't even been consulted on this. And he heads up the Regional Rail Authority for Hennepin County, right? So,
Yes, and I realized that they were doing something. So I don't want to
Yeah.
say they were not doing anything. They were doing something, but we needed to make sure that it was a more inclusive process, and
Got
so
it.
that we could be very targeted into making sure that North Minneapolis had a voice and clearly understood exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
So immediately after that, I got on the phone. I called the commissioner back. I called Brent Rusko. I start calling lots of people. And we started getting together. And so
is this Brent Rusko right here?
that's
Oh, hi,
right. That's
Brent.
the guy
Oh.
right there on the
Glad
front
to hear
line,
you.
let me
Okay.
tell you.
All right. He's in the
but-
front row here.
But he was very helpful. Then, Carrie
Yeah.
Disick, who worked for Mark Stingline, and others were very helpful around making sure we had information. And we started to say it's important for us to have a community engagement as a part of this. And so that voice could be heard.
Yeah.
So everything that Kenya articulated is true. And so as we got closer and closer to making a decision, remember, we had to find creative ways by which to get people. So I want to underscore, for lack of a better way of putting it, the work that it took to knock on doors and not just do a part of North Minneapolis, but we did a whole territory of North Minneapolis.
Listen, it's one thing to knock on doors as a candidate for political office. It's a whole heck of a different deal when you're starting to knock on doors for, gathering votes and information about what people want to see in a light rail system, right?
Well, it is, and it was really interesting because a lot of people didn't know, what was happening and that the actual routes were being, what routes were being looked at. So it was a good process, and we do plan to do more. But yeah, it was good work. It gets us familiar with the community as well. So
Well, and now we've heard a lot about what's going on in Minneapolis and who you've been talking to around here, but I'd like to know, Winfred, how you came along in this process. What had been done when you got involved?
Were you sort of the tail being wagged by the dog here? What is that?
Well, great. This is a great opportunity. I certainly appreciate it, and including our voice here, especially from the northern end of the Bottineau line, the proposed Bottineau line. So I'm currently a planning commissioner at the city of Brooklyn Park, and so I got to hear some of these things going on and being talked about, and plans being devised, and all of that. In fact, we do have a representative from the planning commission that sits on one of the policy groups. But our folks out in the northwest suburbs, where ACER focuses its work, the folks are largely disconnected, largely uninformed about what was coming down the pike and what was being done. And so our work was to try to see how best we can get folks engaged and get folks informed, and to ensure that their voices were being put on the table, and they were part of the process. Because for us, and the way we've couched the conversation around transit, is about access to jobs, is about access to education and health care. So how are we doing all of this and including the voices of all of these folks?
We're going to take a break here in a minute, but I just want to talk about at what point, where was the project at when you got involved here, Winfred Russell? Had there already been a lot of planning? At what point did you find out about it?
Well, the project had been going on. They've been talking about this for a very long time.
Like 2008, I think.
Yeah, but it was founded in 2008, but we really just got involved in
the 10-year period. Yes, the scoping period that nobody hears about. No, we knew that, and the Central Corridor went through the same process. Go ahead.
Yeah, we did participate in the scoping, but I mean, until ACER got on board, and we really do appreciate the involvement of, like I said, our voices by the CET and the process that was laid out by the Metropolitan Council and the Corridors of Opportunity, really to give us a voice, because we really came in when this conversation had already been taking place for a long time, and many of these folks were not there, had not been at the meetings, and didn't know that, what transit is to begin with. So we just really got involved in the process, and now are trying to push forward the voices and the interests of especially new American community groups that largely concentrated in the northwest suburbs, to get their voices on the table, because we're trying to couch the conversation around transit, that transit is not sort of this one-dimensional type approach to things where the trains just come down, the bus just come down, but how can it serve as a catalyst for really revitalizing Brooklyn Park, for creating business opportunities for our people, and making sure that they'll get into jobs.
We're going to, and we're actually going to get to that issue about job creation, community development, economic development along the line. But just before we go to, we have about a minute left before we go to break. And Gary, maybe you can tell me, we were very quickly the alignment issue for a while was big, but that seems to be settled now, doesn't it?
The alignment issue, we're still taking comments, the Metropolitan Council. This project is now in transition from the Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority to the Metropolitan Council.
All right.
And so we're taking comments to amend our transportation plan so that we can include Bottineau within it. While the alignment issue, we have agreement along the line by every city, which is a condition for it to be accepted by the Metropolitan Council.
I see.
But before we get into that, I just want to say, I got into this, I was the CEO of North Point Health and Wellness. I read an article about Bobby Joe Champion's work to ensure that North Minneapolis was included. And I, at the time, said, wow, what a historic and thing to do, because this is such an important issue. And so I learned about it in 2007, if I remember
If we
correctly.
can, we're going to take a quick break right now. We've been asked to take the break right now for a couple of minutes. And then, Gary, when you come back, you can finish up that comment about that, and then clarify this business of how that process has to work through Hennepin County. In the meantime, if you just joined us, we're talking about light rail coming to the north side of Minneapolis in just a few years, but the planning had to start a long time before this. And we're live in front of a great audience at the Minneapolis Urban League with our guests, Northside Transportation Network member Kenya McKnight, who sits on the Metropolitan Transit Advisory Board, State Senator Bobby Joe Champion, over to our right, and on the Key Transportation Finance Committee in the Senate, and then Metropolitan Council member Gary Cunningham, and Brooklyn Park activist Winfred Russell, Executive Director of the African Career Education and Resource outfit known as ACER.
We're going to take a brief station break now, and because the show is being recorded, we can't take your comments right now via Facebook or Twitter, so we will have a Q&A session right after the break. So stay with us. Truth to Tell will be right back.
You are watching Truth to Tell's Community Connection series.
Welcome back to Truth to Tell. I'm Michelle Ali Murati.
And I'm Andy Driscoll, and this is a very big week for us here at Truth to Tell, thanks to the Bush Foundation, Truth to Tell and its parent CivicMedia-Minnesota, in conjunction with the St. Paul Neighborhood Network community cable nonprofit, and ably assisted by the Alliance for Metropolitan Stability and a mess of other organizations working with them, are launching our special series of radio and television programs shot right here on location, where the issues actually meet the road. No pun intended here. The series is called Community Connections, and tonight, our first program on the coming Bottineau Transitway is originating from the Minneapolis Urban League Center in North Minneapolis. The proposed Bottineau light rail line is designated at the moment to run through, I say at the moment now that I'm hearing comments from Gary Cunningham, we'll talk about this in a second, but is going to run through and around the north side up into Brooklyn Park in a few short years. Like the Hiawatha and Central Corridor lines before it, this line faces community issues not always easily resolved as the Met Council, Hennepin County, and local activists work out what will be best for an increasingly transit-dependent population, not to mention the developments along the line. So
we return now to our conversation, and before we went to break, we interrupted Gary Cunningham talking about your involvement with the project thus far.
And the comments you're receiving on the, well, you were saying the LRT alignment, but I thought it was settled. That's what I was thinking about.
I think it is mostly settled, but we do have to take comments on the transportation plan. In order to incorporate it into the plan, we have to take public comments as part of our process. So let me say a few things here, though, because I think this has been a long process. This is, we talk about 2007. This goes back quite a ways, probably 10 years.
Yeah.
Commissioner Mike Opad of the Hennepin County Board has carried a lot of the ball here, and he deserves a lot of thanks and praise for carrying this project through. You can imagine, to get every city along the line to agree to a specific route.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
That's powerful stuff.
But did they?
And they have. We've got
Finally.
an agreement all the way, and the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board has agreed to the line along the Theodore Wirth Parkway as well. So there is a lot of jurisdiction, a lot of engineering work, other things. So I just want to say that we certainly have had some serious public service that went on in this project, including the work that went on with Congressman Ellison and his work to
At the
actually,
FTA federal
yes,
stuff?
actually
Yeah.
help us think about how we were even going to get to position this. So, and then I want to, I've said a lot of thank yous, but I think it's important because also the community stepped up to the plate. Meaning there were a lot of people in this community, and I grew up in this community, who actually stepped up to the plate and had a voice in how we were moving this forward. Now, did everything work out the way everybody wanted it to? It never does. And that's the reality of it. But as we were doing this project, and I became a Metropolitan Council member, and I represent North Minneapolis, downtown, and South Minneapolis as District 7, I am appointed by the governor to
Oh,
represent.
your
this
district
area.
is that big?
Yeah,
is
my
it?
district is that
Oh,
big.
okay.
And as I got into this project, one of the things that and I came in like halfway through, and I started asking questions about, why wasn't Broadway selected? Well, all of these questions that were questions on my mind. And one of the things that working with Councilmember Samuels and then Representative Bobby Joe Champion, one of the things that we were able to do was get a study, an alternative analysis study for Broadway for streetcars. And this is a big deal, and the Metropolitan Council put up a couple $100,000, Hennepin County put up some money, and we're now in the process of figuring out how we're going to do this analysis. But this analysis is so important because anywhere where streetcars are put, it helps create economic development. Now, I worked at
Wherever
Yeah.
rails are laid.
Right.
actually,
I worked at North Point. North Point, one of the largest employers in North Minneapolis. We need jobs in North Minneapolis. We need jobs. We need economic development. And both the light rail is an opportunity because Ozen Highway, believe it or not, when I grew up here, was always part of North Minneapolis. In fact, when I was a kid here, it was a commercial corridor there. That people don't remember that, but there were stores and grocery store, all kind of stuff going on there. So we have an opportunity when you look at Southwest Corridor coming through North Minneapolis. You have the Bottineau Corridor coming through North Minneapolis. We have the potential of a streetcar alignment in North Minneapolis. We actually have the potential to remake this community as an integrated economic development hub for both this community, but also as a feeder for jobs downtown and other places. I think we sit at a huge opportunity for the residents of North Minneapolis.
Well, and it does seem to be that way. And of course, anybody who has studied light rail elsewhere or has studied the resurgence of mass transit in other communities has discovered that solid rails do bring development and jobs. And so I think I can see why you guys are very excited about this. Just as a quick mention, Broadway is not really wide enough to carry a light rail line itself because it's big, isn't it? So a streetcar might fit pretty well along Broadway. Am I wrong?
Well, I don't think you're wrong, but I know that was one of the things studied, and I know that there was a big concern as to, why the light rail system could not go down there, and I know there's some engineering talk, and I have to leave that for the engineers because I practice law every day. So, But what is important is something that Gary Cunningham talked about is for us to look at a comprehensive transportation system
Yes.
that will help aid and abet and improve the quality of life for not only just North Minneapolis folks, but for North Minneapolis to also become a destination point as opposed to just a simple pass-through.
Well, and where Gary Cunningham had mentioned that analysis is sort of at its beginning stages. Is that correct? Or has this analysis begun? Where are we at with that planning? And
Well, if I could,
Yeah.
there is an, excuse me,
Yeah.
there is an analysis that is we're in discussions with both Hennepin County, the Med Council, and the City of Minneapolis to prepare an alternatives analysis for Broadway. That has not started yet.
so this is
Okay.
for
It hasn't
Broadway
started,
exclusively?
but let me finish.
Yeah.
I actually think what we should be thinking about in addition to that is an overall land use planning for the whole of North Minneapolis, running from 394 to 94 out to Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, in part because what we actually can create is what is the public investment that we need to make to reinvent jobs and opportunities for North Minneapolis and beyond. We need to start thinking together about that, and we need to say what is the resource allocation that's going to be put in here to make a difference for people of all income ranges to thrive in this community. So, I'm actually trying to think about how do we put the engineers and planners together to say what would we do with the community to really address some of these long-term interests, because this is a $1 billion investment, and so we should take advantage of that investment in terms of what happens with low-income people and people of color within this community.
Yeah, and I've seen this kind of discussion before, where communities are can use light rail almost as a commercial and economic development resurgence in places where it has not been very vital and going very well. But let's talk about, do you have any notion at all, you guys, and just everybody can pipe up now, about the kinds of economic and community development that can occur along this corridor, all the way up to Brooklyn Park? Speak your piece, Winfred.
or what is already happening too?
Yeah, and is anything happening yet? Because along the central corridor, the very discussion of light rail there raised property values. There were concerns about property taxes going through the roof because of it. As a result of that, they were afraid that many residents might be frozen out of their homes because they couldn't afford to take the increases in property taxes that increased values would take care of. So is some of that going on here?
Well, I'll just tell you
Winfred Russell.
our example. I think from the clip you just showed, what we did was that a number of the folks we work with, like I said earlier, many new immigrant groups, new Americans, had not heard about transit and the benefit transit brings to a community. So what we did was we took them on a tour. And for a lot of our folks, a lot of these folks we work with, it's a show and tell. So they were able to go and experience in real time what transit-oriented development means, and how high-density housing around a transit stop, how beneficial that is, and land use, and building businesses, and starting businesses, and all of that. So when we got back, because we had a community meeting where we gave them all of these terms and all of that, and they still really couldn't make the connection. But after we took them on a tour, and it's like, aha, for a number of them. So we came back and we put together, with the help of Neighborhood Development Center out in St. Paul and funding from Hennepin County, we developed a small business training class and worked with our partners at the City of Brooklyn Park and North Hennepin Community College. And we sent out this information out there, and we had slot for only 12 folks. And over 35 persons showed up to get a seat to learn how to start a business because they have seen the potential of transit-oriented development.
Now, that may not seem like a lot of people, but that's a pretty good turnout, isn't it?
We were surprised by that. We got applicants coming in from Shakopee, and this is across the board. Folks were coming in from all over, and like, how can we take advantage of this? How can we get a piece of this? And so now we're having our graduation. The first cohort graduation is next Thursday at North Hennepin Community College, where folks have now learned some skills. And so we're working with the next group of folks and existing businesses about, okay, how can you take advantage of some of these land use, get some land use policies going, where folks can begin to build businesses around the 5 transit stops that will be in Bottineau.
Yeah, okay, all right. So, it looks like you want to say something, Senator.
Well, I was just going to say that a part of the challenge also is to get folks to revision what their community could look like, right? So you got to balance the issues around displacement and what that looks like. You got to balance the issues of when we think in terms of commercial corridors and how do we make sure that that's in place, and how do you also make sure that there's affordable housing that is along the corridor so that you have a real community that is full of the various levels of people so that they can all participate in us moving forward.
Now, NERC, excuse me, Senator, but NERC gets involved in that, doesn't it? Housing and that sort of thing that...
Sure. All of the neighborhood associations throughout the city. But yes, that is definitely on the radar. One thing, and just building off what Senator Champion is saying, is that in this community particularly, people are particularly concerned about displacement, about what we consider regentification of the current population of people of color and replacing us with white people. That's the general conversation. And so with higher incomes, and because our city is very driven to increase the tax base, which I think we all care about throughout our city. However, the method is used to increase tax base is focused on housing development. Well, I'll argue that there's a number of ways to increase the tax base that doesn't necessarily require home ownership development in this neighborhood as a primary way, but that's a big concern.
Especially like single-family.
Well, you have to think about the fact that if people don't have jobs, then how do you buy houses, right? So the houses that you're building are for who? And then there's this term about workforce housing, but for who? So as we talk about the destination place, I think it becomes more apparent that there's a need to broaden the conversation around housing development to mixed-use housing that is, supportive of even our retiring population of seniors, right? Where would they live? Young adults like myself who's not ready to purchase a home, where can I live? That's affordable, that doesn't necessarily have to be subsidized, but it does have to be affordable. $900, $800, but not $15. So it's about, I think this new idea that we're toying with transit-oriented development gives us a different way of looking at how to create equitable outcomes with this sort of a initiative, which we're very excited about. So again, for this community, it's been a lot about, the last thing I'll say is this, is that there's also a historical issue here between particularly African-American community and government and how policy and decisions are made. And I think North Minneapolis historically does not feel that our interest and voice matters, that the city of Minneapolis and the county and whomever will do what they want. And so part of the challenge in engaging is getting people to understand that, this is a little different now. It always has been, but just really empowering people to understand that your voice does matter. And working through some of those historical barriers and building on the experience of the Rondo Day community. I think in respect to Black History Month, which we're in, we can talk about the issue that happened there and how that community fought hard for an opportunity that we're sitting at this panel today discussing. They were there fighting. They were there talking about their issues, but they weren't working in partnership, or government wasn't working in partnership with them to consider what their interests and needs are, which is what we're doing here today. So our fight is about helping to create a new narrative and new interest and inspiring our community to get involved to shape our future. We're doing that, but it's a process. And again, it's working through those historical
So
issues.
on that note,
Yes.
we need to bring our community into the conversation here. So we will open it up for questions from the audience.
And
we
please raise your hand. We have a microphone
Yeah.
traveling around the room.
Siobhan will
Siobhan
be
Kieran's over here is our Irish aide. And she'll, if Siobhan will
a
just
question
raise
right
your
over here?
hand, and if you'd like something to have a question asked. Right here in front of the camera, Siobhan.
Greetings to you all. I'm LaShella Sims, and I'm a organizer with MICA, and I'm also part of the African American Leadership Forum's Transportation Action Group. I'm a co-chair. My other co-chair is here beside me. But one of the things at this moment that I'm concerned about is that the policymaker indices, the county, the Met Council, the feds, that they aren't talking to each other in regards to the major decisions that they're making on people's lives that are life changing. An example just with me yesterday in regards to I also cover the Southwest and regionally, and we were trying to set up a meeting with one of the South Minneapolis City Council persons, and he was not going to meet with us in regards to talking to his staff in regards to his busyness and priorities, and Bottineau was such a long way away. And I got to thinking, well, listen, we're meeting with the government is sending federal people here. I'm talking to the Met Council. I'm talking to Keith Ellison's office, et cetera, et cetera. So it didn't sit well with me. And I get to the point of actually writing a letter. But it happened that my coworker, one of the persons that was making a phone called and said that he was going to meet. And this is kind of the second or third example that when we go to the various entities, we talk and raise points, but when they get together, it seems like they aren't talking to each other. And how can we change this, especially as Gary said and Kendra said?
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for your answer. That's a toss-up for you guys. Everybody talking to each other, county, cities. We are in America, after all, so we expect things to happen tomorrow. Planning for 2019 seems just completely out of our ken. So that must be very difficult for you guys to keep things generating and what goes on. Gary?
Well, I've worked in different bureaucracies. I was the director of planning and development for Hennepin County for a number of years, and I certainly know what LaSim is talking about. There is often, sometimes the trains aren't connecting, if you will. But I do think on this project, there has been a lot of discussion, a lot of communication in the transfer of the responsibilities from Hennepin County to the Metropolitan Council around this project. And I do also think that, and I also provided input into the city's process for the environmental impact statement, the draft. And so I also was involved with that. So there has been a lot of communication. Does it always work? No. Has it worked to a level that we can actually get something done here with this project? I think so. And so while I'm not all the way happy, but there is one thing I do want to say that's important to say here, that this project will not happen unless we have a way to fund it. Right now, the governor has put on the table a 1/4-cent sales tax to pay for expanding the whole system of rail and buses in the metro area. If you want this project to happen, I'd say call your senator or call your legislator to let them know that we actually need to fund this system so that we can have the kind of transportation that can get people all income levels everywhere within our region. It's just so important.
We have another question in the audience.
Just a second, may I quickly get a response from the senator?
Yes, I think what Gary Cunningham has said is true, because we are looking at the budget right now, and so I think our budget should really reflect our priorities. And if we believe that transit-oriented development and a comprehensive transportation system statewide is important. We have to step forward and make sure that our electeds know that. For an example, I know that there's a movement of people saying that they want at least $300 million annually every year devoted towards, transportation. And I know our governor has stepped up and thus far has said, well, I'll do maybe $225 million.
So you support this tax?
I do, and I support us making sure that we continue to improve our quality of life by making the necessary investments in order to continue to move our state forward.
Good. Ken, you wanted to say something.
The last thing is I think one way to help move our officials and to make sure the conversation is heard is that all of us working in the community, I think, have to be intentional about working together more strongly so that we have a united message and that we don't undermine each other's equity. I think often, it's hard doing this work, and we work on our own a lot, and it's like, oh, I'm in the shine, I'm in the spotlight, but it doesn't really help the rest of us. So I think if we can be more intentional about how we work together and have a unified message, that helps us get the equity we need as a community in general across North and South.
All right, so we have a question over here.
Okay, hello, my name is Wong, and I'm currently a senior at North High School.
Hello, Wong.
So I have a question that I would like to know if you have suggestion on how youth can get more involved in the work, since it's a long-term development. Thank you.
Yes. Who wants to field that one? Winfred?
No,
Okay.
I'll ponder that.
Go ahead, Ken.
That,
Can you make
Asian Media Access, I think, has done a great job at reaching out to a lot of young people. They've done a great video. But I think, you just, pardon me, but I think young people just have to connect your interest to it. I think this system serves you greatly, right? I'm still young too, but with the merging of serve us great.
We're all young.
But
here,
the public school, the Minneapolis Public Schools just merged with Metropolitan Council. So the light rail can serve you going to school, going to recreations, your jobs. You just have to plug yourself in. I think we can probably do a better job at connecting with high schools, centers where you are, and bringing you to these tables to help shape the vision and decisions that are being made about it.
One of the things that ACER is doing, for example, next week, we, again, a lot of our activities, we are designing our activities, our engagement activities with youth and young people in mind, because, like you said, they are the future and the generation that will be more impacted by this. So, for example, we're doing a play. And so we're trying to change the narrative around how folks can look at transit in a sort of comprehensive way. So we have, for example, a play that will take place next week at North Hennepin Community College, which would be one of the major stops along the line.
A real play.
A real theatrical performance.
Theatrical performance.
Yes, but again, trying to...
I thought you were being metaphorical there.
No.
Go ahead.
But we're trying to send the message of how transit can be used as a catalyst for a whole host of things. And so we have the young people, it's a hip-hop play and getting a lot of young people involved in all of that. So those are some of the things that we are doing too as well to ensure that all of the stakeholders along the Bottineau Transitway project, all of them are involved in this conversation.
Okay, so we're going to continue this conversation with the audience right after we close off this first part of the program, but our time has run out for that. So in this Community Connection series, our time has run out for this first show, but thanks to you all for joining us tonight. Thank you. This has been just great. Kenya McKnight is with the North Side Transportation Network, part of NERC and the North Side Residents Redevelopment Council, and she sits on the Met Council's Transit Advisory Board. Newly designated Bush Leadership Fellow. Kenya, thanks.
We also have with us Senator Bobby Joe Champion, newly elected for District 59, and he's vice chair of the powerful Senate Finance Committee, as well as a member of both the Policy and Finance Division of the Transportation and Public Safety Division. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. And Gary Cunningham's been everything in here, everything in this town. He's now a member of the Met Council. He's also former head of Hennepin County African American Men Project and a program officer for Northwest Area Foundation.
I'm the vice president of the Northwest.
You're the
Area
vice
Foundation.
president
Thank
of the
you.
Northwest Area. Why
think we should
why
get
didn't
that
I know
straightened out.
that?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, all right. Oh boy. All right.
And finally, we had with us Winfred Russell. He serves as a African Career Education and Resource Executive, or Resource Center. Is that what you say?
Resource Inc.
Okay,
It's
Resource
Resource Inc.,
All
I
right.
see.
I never know how to quite finish that out.
You can say ACER
How
for
do you
sure.
close that off there? All right.
He's the executive director of ACER for short, and he's former candidate for Brooklyn Park mayor last year. Thank you, Winfred,
Thank
for
you.
being with us today.
The lessons learned about community involvement in these massive infrastructure projects, like light rail and bus transit systems, should teach us all the importance of keeping our many voices in the mix of the issues and needs and ideas necessary for the Met Council, Hennepin County, state legislature, all the other local and regional agencies to stay honest and respond to the needs of the community. Thank you all very much for being with us tonight, and good night.